mismo sistema, porque un elemento que puedo platicar: cuando campesinos en Chiapas tomaron las tierras en algunos lugares y ellos se convirtieron en los productores y dueños de esas tierras, los comerciantes, los terratenientes anteriores se convirtieron en los comerciantes de los productos que los campesinos después tenían que vender, y entonces en el segundo paso, en el segundo momento, volvían a caer en la misma estrategia del despojo y de la explotación. En un momento eran mozos de las fincas, y en otro momento eran productores con precios bajos de sus productos. Entonces, ¿cómo en esos ejemplos nosotros podemos vemos que necesitamos pues hacer un camino alternativo que solamente puede venir con la capacidad del trabajo colectivo? El trabajo colectivo, la propiedad colectiva, el gobierno colectivo, las decisiones propias, el ejercicio permanente de irnos organizando para tener nuestras propias decisiones y poder en un momento tratar de decidir sobre nuestro propio futuro y construir el espacio de nuestra libertad, espacios nuevos de libertad. Y esto es lo que yo siento que hemos aprendido también ahora, de que sí existe estos espacios, y desde América Latina, desde este espacio donde nos movemos, hay infinidad de estos procesos que vienen de los pueblos indígenas, de los pueblos campesinos, de sus luchas libertarias, en que diríamos que ahora, inclusive por ejemplo en Cuba, a través de unos mecanismos que se llaman ahora de poder producir en la propia finca, están volviendo a otra manera de distribución de la tierra, pero también ya con otro modelo, que es el modelo de la posibilidad de ser ellos mismos los que producen y ellos mismos los que pueden distribuir y pueden salir del sistema estatal de control de la producción. Esto es fundamental, esta experimentación permanente de caminos diferentes para poder ir construyendo lo que nosotros decimos en nuestro lenguaje, de construir el propio camino. El propio camino quiere decir que lo hacemos con nuestro propio esfuerzo, que lo hacemos desde abajo, donde se recupera el sentido del trabajo. El sentido del trabajo es precisamente la posibilidad del uso de todo nuestro ser para producir bienes. El sentido del trabajo es la realización de nosotros y de nosotras para tener bienes y distribuir los bienes y compartir e intercambiar los bienes. Y esta posibilidad de transformarse en un producto hacia el otro y hacia la otra nos permite de alguna manera ser libres. Y este camino de libertad son caminos que nos ponen en una posibilidad real de esperanza. No vamos a poder transformar el sistema si no partimos de esta posibilidad real, que sí la tenemos y que existe en la esperanza de todas las comunidades que de alguna manera están vislumbrando ya una posibilidad nueva de ser en su propia lengua, en su propio territorio, en su propia cultura, en su propia historia, en su propio modelo y en su propio gobierno, como vivir como seres que pueden decir que pueden recuperar la tierra y que pueden volver a construir la casa donde podemos vivir todas y todos. Pues muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Glacier, Mr. Jorge Santiago. Now we have a speaker from the Southern Hemisphere, Professor Ariel Salleh. You have one slide.
I have a few, so maybe. sustainability. And clearly the word sustainability, notions of sustainability are failing us. Yes, this is
Hello?
Yes.
Good. The notions of sustainability that are current at the moment are failing us because those who have formulated that notion have forgotten that we human beings are part of nature, that we are nature ourselves in embodied form. And so that we are part of a humanity-nature relationship in metabolism. Our bodies are in metabolism with nature. And this is the bottom line, basically. Now, just to build on what we noticed, what we observed before in my earlier talk this week, the whole problem starts with Aristotle in ancient Greece and his notion of the great chain of being, with, well, God at the top, that's optional, and Mother Nature at the bottom, which certainly isn't optional. The division of humanity from nature and the line of dissociation, and I literally mean psychological splitting, psychological dissociation between the sphere of humanity and the sphere of reason. And this model is useful, I bother you with it a second time, because it is useful in thinking about how the different social movements are unified. You can learn from this not only the ecological splitting of humanity and nature, but the tensions between the masculine and feminine cultures that we live through, the North versus the South, and the urban and rural. Now, this dissociation has been built on in a number of ways, and some of you will be familiar with the US Marxist John Bellamy Foster, who points out that Marx himself observed that the setting up of industrial cities produced a metabolic rift, a break between the parasitical cities and the rural hinterland from which they drew their resources. He calls this the metabolic rift. Another leftist sociologist, Dickens, in the UK, Peter Dickens, says that with industrialization, the more and more people needs are mediated by technologies, the less people have a sensuous connection with their environment, and they lose the memory of their embodiedness in nature. And then, of course, various ecological feminists, myself, but also people like Maria Mies in Germany, Carolyn Merchant in the United States, Vandana Shiva in India, Silvia Federici in the States again, and many others, also point to this dissociation, seeing it as exacerbated in the construction of masculinity and the cultures and activities of masculinity. And it's described as a kind of amnesia, a kind of forgetting, a kind of splitting from nature. Now this amnesia becomes embodied in the knowledge systems of the dominant culture, and I just want to address in particular economics, because this has sort of become the dominant knowledge system of our time, the dominant discipline of our time, and it typifies, and of course it is through economics that notions of sustainability are framed currently. So how does this amnesic consciousness shape the methodology of economics? And I'm not even talking about mainstream economics. I actually developed this looking at ecological economics, and it's still equally dissociated. So, good. We have it. So, what you find here is that the economy is an entirely ad hoc system. I might say that the dissociation of economics shows up in this discipline that it deals entirely with idealized human practices. So economics runs parallel, if you like, to ecology, which deals with material cycles and material practices. So these idealizations, first of all, the economy is quite ad hoc. The system, the boundaries of the system are never really justified. For example, domestic labour of women. Is it inside the economy or is it outside the economy? Nature, we're beginning to realise that perhaps the economy doesn't finish where we thought it finished before, but somehow it rolls on into nature. The idealizations of economics deal with a splitting of humanity versus nature, a dualism, without any sense that the two are interrelated in a dialectic which is co-evolved over time. Economics treats living systems effectively as dead matter, simply there for the process of commodification of goods for sale. In this discipline, complex metabolic cycles in nature are reduced to linear mathematized variables. Now we're seeing this par excellence with the response to climate change in terms of carbon trading. Counting carbon emissions, taking one variable, carbon, out of the ecosystem, measuring it, and sticking a price on it. And sometimes even this fantastical alienation from nature leads to formulating the economy, believing that it actually functions as an engine, a machine. Again, scarcity is understood here as an ontological given rather than an historical anomaly. The fact, I think we heard earlier from one of the speakers that there is an abundance of food in the world. It is simply a byproduct of how this economic system operates. Nobody asks here about power. Who decides on the scale? I mean, I'm thinking particularly here of Herman Daly's work, the ecological economist Herman Daly. And the other one, in terms of thinking of the economy of machine, was, of course, Robert Costanza, the US ecological economist. Daly, he doesn't ask who decides on scale. He suggests, yes, we operate with a smaller scale. He doesn't ask who has a right to distribute to whom. The concepts in this discipline, in this mainstream, dominant, well, hegemonic, I suppose you'd call it, discipline, are obviously influenced by class, gender, and ethnicity, and this is embodied in the actual economic constructs. But this is not questioned. There is no reflexivity in the discipline. In fact, an objectivist or scientistic vocabulary is used in terms of humans are rendered as capital themselves. Nature is rendered as capital. And finally, the use in economic texts of a passive voice to describe the economy mystifies people, deflects them from a sense of being able to exercise their own capacity for changing it. But the fact is that most exchanges between human beings and nature go on outside of any monetary economy. And the interesting thing about this is that it implies that there is a class of labour, of people, who reproduce those transactions, and they do it in a regenerative way. I call this the meta-industrial class. And the reason for that is that they exist meta outside of the industrial system. They frame it, but and they are totally necessary for the function of the industrial capitalist system. But the industrial capitalist system is not necessary for them. And of course, who do I mean? I mean women, those responsible for caring labour. I I mean peasants, subsistence farmers, I mean indigenous gatherers who also take care of water catchments and forests. So these people, this meta-industrial class with these regenerative skills have developed or practice kinds of economy which are sustainable. And the reason for this I've gone so fast I've jumped over a whole pile of my points here, but the reason is that they understand the nature and the structure of the humanity-nature metabolism. They work on a small scale, their focus is on food and energy sovereignty, they operate with a small consumption footprint, using local resources and observing the usage of these resources as they go. In organic farming of peasants, or in gathering economies, there is no waste. Closed-loop production is the norm. And the hands-on responsiveness to the material cycles of nature means that they keep an eye on the entropy, they keep an eye on the running down of natural systems and ensure that they don't run down, that cycles are kept intact. So here we are seeing a really effective sustainability science, but it is not given the name of science. Here in peasant farming, or perhaps caregiving, mothers caring for children, judgments are formed by trial and error, and there's an understanding of processes from beginning to end, cradle to grave. The time frame is intergenerational, intrinsically precautionary, a very fundamental principle of good sustainability science. In this meta-industrial provisioning, human and other species functions must be reconciled. It's important to know the cycles of the cow and how humans can live with this animal and other species in a way that allows all lives to thrive and flourish. Forms of decision-making in regenerative labour are multi-criteria. There's an understanding of the whole. Problem-solving is synergistic with both ecological and social benefits. Communal labour means transparency. You can't have corruption where you have people working together in small groups. Transparency and accountability. The product of the labour is enjoyed immediately and shared. So it creates sociology. There's individual benefits. There's a creative integration of the worker's mental skills and manual skills in regenerative and reproductive labour, as we've seen with peasants or with caregiving householders. So a kind of eco-sufficiency is achieved without debts being externalised, costs being externalised onto others. Just a little plug for more on the notions of eco-sufficiency as analysed and described by women. Have a look at our book, Eco-Sufficiency, Global Justice. So this word eco-sufficiency, what it really means is living well. And as we know, there are many people in cultures around the world who already understand and practice living well. So there are three, I think, main criteria of this kind of economy, eco-sufficient economy. The economy reproduces nature. It gives fertility back to the soil, maintaining clean air and water. It protects, not commodifies, the variety of genetic plant forms and animal species. It uses simple technologies with a minimum of resources. It is a culture of creativity. And the economy reproduces individuals. It meets basic needs of health and self-expression without the medium of money, necessarily. It enlists cooperation among the able-bodied in caring for others. It nurtures equality, regardless of gender, race, age, ability. It is a culture of patience. And finally, the economy reproduces community. It minimises the separation between home and workplace, eliminates class power by involving everyone in decision-making. It celebrates community itself as the goal of economic life. It is a culture of dialogue. I think living well is the model for sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Salleh. And we have wonderful speakers who kept the time perfectly in this last session.